Good morning, everyone. Good morning, my dear BSed English students. Now we will be having the continuation of our discussion on the literary elements. Last meeting, we have the setting and its parts, as well as the determination of the different types of setting. We also have characters, characterization, and how we could give different ways on how we could describe our characters. Today, we will be having the literary element, which is the crucial part of every story. This is called the plot. And I will be having a series of discussion because I will be showing you different ways on how we could present the plot. The first one is the Freytag's pyramid. So let's begin. The first question is, what is a plot? It is a sequence of interconnected events within the story. So everybody would say a play, a novel, a film, an epic, or any form of literary work could have a plot. So my last question to you, class, is magkakaroon ba tayo ng kwento kung walang tagpuan or setting? You said no. Magkakaroon ba tayo ng kwento kung walang characters? You also say no or said no. And this question, ito alam nating lahat na hindi magkakaroon ng kwento kung walang plot because it is the sequence of interconnected events. So it is not just telling what had happened, but it will be helping us understand the cause and effect relationships between the events that occur. So ipapaliwanag sa plot mula sa pinagmulan hanggang sa kinatapusan ng kwento. So therefore, we must follow a certain structure of the plot. For nearly as long as there had been narratives with plots, there had been people who have tried to analyze and describe the structure of plot. So may mga ipapakita ako as we progress with our discussion na mga well-known findings or attempts para ipaliwanag ang general structure ng plot. Ang una nga po dito ay ang Freytag's pyramid. So ano ba ang Freytag's pyramid at sino ang nagpanukala nito? So one of the most influential people to create a framework for analyzing plot is the German writer Gustav Freytag. So he argued that all plots can be broken down into 5 stages. Ito class yung pinakang common natin na ginagamit when we present the plot or the series of events in the story. I know you are really familiar at itong kay Freytag ang lagi nating ginagamit sa DepEd. Or even in private schools, dun sa ating mga junior years or even elementary days, pag tayo ay tumatalakay ng literature, itong kay Freytag ang lagi nating ginagamit. So first is the exposition, the rising action would follow, the climax, the falling action, and the final outcome or the denouement. So bakit po niya ito dinevelop? It is a way of describing the plots of plays at a time when most plays were divided into 5 acts. So kaya pala, ang pinagbasehan niya ay yung layer ng mga play or mga dula wherein 5 acts yung division ng bawat play. And he layered it into 5 called a pyramid. And later on, I will show you the diagram or the illustration of the Freytag's pyramid. So, hindi lang po siya limited sa play ngayon, kundi sa mga novels, short stories, films, and television shows. Ito ang itsura ng Freytag's pyramid. We have the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So, mag-example tayo. I have here a sample story entitled The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Ating integrate na rin yung pinag-aralan natin sa setting and characters. Okay. The exposition or the beginning of the story would suggest us to tell the setting. Okay. And then we have the situation and climate as well as the description of the characters. So here, the old man's house would be the setting of the story, and the situation or climate, the narrator is irritated by the old man and his eyes scary, tense, and suspenseful. And dito naman, sa characters, the narrator, the old man, the police officers, and the neighbor. So, dun pa lang nagkaroon na tayo ng beginning of the story. So, let's have the rising action or ano yung mga sunod na naganap. The narrator watches the man sleep every night. The narrator is nice to him every morning and asks how he is doing. The next, the narrator sneaks into the old man's house for 7 days. So ano kaya yung pwedeng naging conflict noon? When we say conflict, it's another element of the short story. So ano kaya po yun? Anong naging tunggalian or problema? The narrator is extremely irritated by the man's foggy blue eye. It could be. So kung siya ay irritated, kung siya ay nagkaroon ng tunggalian, or nagka-problem, or nagka-issue, what would be the climax or the highest point of interest in the story? The narrator brutally murders the old man. And let's have the falling action. It draws the story to an end. The narrator chops up the body and hides in under the floorboard. The police show up and slows them around. Then he invites them to sit and chat for a while. So it draws the story to an end. Masasagot na yung ating kwento, ano kaya ang sunod na mangyayari when he was invited to sit and chat for a while by the policeman. So the resolution of the story or the ending of the story is, okay, the beating of the heart drives the narrator crazy. Finally, he can't take it anymore. He confesses and shows the police where the body is hidden. So that's why it was entitled The Telltale Heart of Edgar Allan Poe. So for you to better understand the story, since this is just the exposition or the narration of the plot, I suggest you read Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. Okay, so let's have the theme. You can't always trust a narrator. Be aware of the point of view. Let's now proceed. The exposition, isa-isahin natin. It is the first section of the plot, and during the exposition, the audience is introduced to key background information, including the characters and their relationships to one another. And as I told you, pinapakilala din dito or pinapaalam ang setting, the time and place of events. But as we learned, kung ano ang setting, it is not just the time and place, but every detail of it, including the social condition, the mood, the tone, and the other aspects of setting. So, yes, in any other relevant ideas, details, or historical context that would further explain kung bakit yun yung setting ng kwento. And in a 5-act play, the exposition typically occurs in the first act. Let's have the rising action. The rising action begins with the inciting incident or complication. So dito, an event that creates a problem or conflict for the characters. Dito na ipapakilala ang isang problema, ang sitwasyon na magbibigay sa mga tauhan ng turning point. Pero it is not yet the turning point. A conflict first, setting in motion a series of increasingly significant events. Some critics describe the rising action as the most important part of plot. Sabi ng iba, pero sabi naman ng iba, the most important or the most exciting is the climax. Kasi doon, magkakaroon tayo ng kwento or ng idea ano kaya ang mangyayari sa susunod. Katulad nung sa Telltale Heart, mahuhuli ba yung pumatay or hindi when he was asked to narrate what had happened. So here, critics would describe the rising action as the most important part of the plot because the climax and outcome of the story would not take place if the events of the rising action did not occur. So ito naman yung explanation nga po ng ibang mga critics. So the reason, hindi naman daw magkakaroon ng exciting part ang kwento or hindi naman magkakaroon na ang flow ang kwento kung walang naging problem. So, kung walang na-create na issue. So, magiging plain nga lang po ang kwento kung walang conflict. Kasi dito sa rising action, na iipakita ano ba yung naging problema. So, as I told you earlier, the rising action usually takes place over the course of the Act 2 and perhaps part of the Act 3. So in between siya ng ikalawa or ikatlong tagpo sa isang kwento or specifically sa play. Ang ikatlo, climax. So huwag po tayong malilito kasi hindi ko na-mention masyado yung conflict kasi class, i-discuss ko sa inyo ng separate ang conflict at yung mga types of conflict. So yung mga man versus man versus himself, man versus society, man versus supernatural, man versus beast, and other conflicts pa na hindi natin na-enumerate before. So, sa rising action, nakikita ang conflict. So, dadako na tayo sa climax ni Freytag. It is a plot in the story's central turning point, which the exposition and the rising action have all been leading up to. So, ano ba ang tinatakbo ng kwento? It's the central turning point. The climax is the moment with the greatest tension or conflict. So dito tayo magkakaroon ng highest point of interest. Katulad dun sa Telltale Heart, the old man was murdered by the narrator. So your all emotions can be stuck up by that event. Though the climax is also sometimes called as the crisis kasi ito na nga yung pinakang highest point of interest na tinatawag natin na tension. It is not necessarily a negative event. It is a tragedy, or in tragedy, the climax will result in an unhappy ending. But in a comedy, the climax usually makes it clear that the story will have a happy ending, di ba? I-mention ko lang din, when we say tragedy, the ending is not happy. Pero sa comedy po, hindi naman ibig sabihin na sinabi natin comedy, nakakatawa. As I always tell you class, when we say comedy, yung traditional or the actual definition of that, the story is ending happily. So in a 5-act play, the climax usually takes place at the end of the third act. And dun sa Freytag's pyramid, dun sa illustration kanina, siya yung nasa pinakang peak or nasa tuktok nung pyramid ni Freytag na nga po. That's why it's the highest point or the turning point which the exposition and rising action had been all leading up to. Ika-apat, the rising action is the series of events leading up to the climax. The falling action is the series of events that follow the climax, ending with the resolution. It's an event that indicates that the story is reaching to its end. So ito na nga po yung magsasabi sa atin na malapit nang matapos ang kwento. An event that indicates that the story is reaching to its end, and in a 5-act play, falling action usually takes place over the course of the 4th act, ending with the resolution. So ano yung naging falling action kanina dun sa Telltale Heart? May dumating na mga pulis para magtanong. Okay? So nakita natin doon, what would happen next? So it will invite our curiosity para isipin, aamin ba siya o hindi? Diba? At dito i-introduce or bibigyan tayo ng hint ng kwento, ito ba ay mag-i-end sa tamang paraan o sa hindi? Diba? Maaaring hindi umamin yung pumatay or pwede naman na siya ay umamin. So it will tell you or give you the hint of what the ending will be. And let's have the last, the denouement. It is from the French word meaning outcome. In literary theory, it refers to the part of plot which ties loose up ends and reveals the final consequences of the events of the story. Dito na talaga yung may closure. Dito na nasagot yung tanong, aamin ba siya o hindi? And during the denouement, the author resolves any final or outstanding questions about the character's fates and may even reveal a little bit about the character's features after the resolution of the story. So nasagot na ang kwento. Happy ending ba siya or a tragedy? In a 5-act play, the denouement takes place in the 5th act. So bakit laging play ang ating nagiging example dito? Kasi nga po, pinagbasihan ni Freytag dito ay ang 5-act play. That's why ang plot niya ay 5. So ulitin natin, what are the 5 parts of the plot according to Freytag? Sinong makapagbibigay? The first one is, okay, what's the first one? Balikan natin. As part of our synthesis, the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So dito, as we progress with our discussion, I will be giving you series of examples in literary stories na may application ng kay Freytag na pyramid. The first one is Hamlet by Shakespeare. So let me read each part. In the exposition of Hamlet, the ghost of Hamlet's father, the former king, appears one night, instructing his son to avenge his death by killing Claudius, Hamlet's uncle and the current king. Sa rising action naman, Hamlet struggles to commit to avenging his father's death. He pretends to go crazy and possibly becomes truly mad to confuse Claudius. Later, he passes up the opportunity to kill his uncle while he prays. And for the climax, Hamlet stabs and kills Polonius, believing it is to be his uncle. This is an important turning point at which Hamlet has committed himself to both violence and revenge. Another climax can be said to be when Hamlet duels Laertes. Let's have the falling action. Hamlet is sent to England but manages to avoid execution and instead returns to Denmark. Ophelia goes mad and dies. Hamlet duels Laertes, ultimately resulting in the deaths of the entire royal family. And the resolution, as he lay dying, Hamlet tells Horatio to make Fortinbras the king of Denmark and to share his story. Fortinbras arrives and speaks hopefully about the future of Denmark. So in this case, this is a tragedy. Let's now have another example. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bront. For the exposition, Blackwood arrives at Wuthering Heights to meet with Heathcliff, a wealthy landlord about renting Thrushcross Grange, another manor just a few miles away. While staying overnight, he sees the ghost of a woman named Catherine. After settling in a grange, Lockwood asked the housekeeper, Nellie Dean, to relate to him the story of Heathcliff and the Heights. For the rising action, most of the rising action takes place in the past when Catherine and Heathcliff were young. We learned the two children were very close. One day, a dog bite forces Catherine to stay for several weeks at the grange where the Lintons live, leading her to become infatuated with the young Edgar Linton. Feeling hurt and betrayed, Heathcliff runs away for 3 years, and Catherine and Edgar get married. Heathcliff then inherits the Heights and marries Edgar's sister Isabella in the hopes of inheriting the Grange as well. For the climax, Catherine becomes sick, gives birth to a daughter named Kathy, and dies. Heathcliff begs Catherine to never leave him, to haunt him, even if it drives him mad. And the falling action, many years pass in Nellie's story, a chain of events allows Heathcliff to gain control of both the Heights and the Grange. He then forces the young Cathy to live with him at the Heights and act as a servant. Blackwood leaves the Grange to return to London. And for the resolution, 6 months later, Blackwood goes back to see Nellie and learns that Heathcliff, still heartbroken and now tired of seeing revenge, has died. Kathy and Hareton fall in love and plan to be married. They inherit the Grange and the Heights. Blackwood visits the graves of Catherine and Heathcliff, noting that both are finally at peace. Another example was Carrie by Stephen King. For our exposition, teenager Carrie is an outcast and lives with her controlling, fiercely religious mother. One day, she starts her period in the showers at school after PE. Not knowing what menstruation is, Carrie becomes frantic. He causes other students to make fun of her and pelt her with sanitary products. Around this time, Carrie discovers that she has telekinetic powers. For the rising action, Carrie practices her telekinesis, which grows stronger. The students who previously tormented Carrie in her locker room are punished by their teacher. One girl, Sue, feels remorseful and asks her boyfriend, Tommy, to take Carrie to the prom. But another girl, Chris, wants revenge against Carrie and plans to rig the prom queen election so that Carrie wins. Carrie attends the prom with Tommy and things go well at first. And the climax? After being named prom queen, Carrie gets on stage in front of the entire school only to be immediately drenched with a bucket of pig's blood. A plot carried out by Chris and her boyfriend Billy. Everybody laughs at Carrie, who goes mad and begins using her telekinesis to start fires and kill everyone in sight. Following action, Carrie returns home and is attacked by her mother. She kills her mother and then goes outside again, this time killing Chris and Billy. As Carrie lay dying, Sue comes over to her and Carrie realizes that Sue never intended to hurt her. She dies. And the resolution? The survivors in the town must come to terms with the havoc Carrie wrought. Some feel guilty for not having helped Carrie sooner. Sue goes to a psychiatric hospital. It's announced that there are no others like Carrie, but we are then shown a letter from a mother discussing her young daughter's telekinetic abilities. And the last example of a story following Freytag model is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. For the exposition, Bella Swan is a high school junior who moves to live with her father in a remote town in Washington state. She meets a strange boy named Edward, and after an initially awkward meeting, the two start to become friends. One day, Edward successfully uses his bare hands to stop a car from crushing Bella, making her realize that something is very different about this boy. And for the rising action, Bella discovers that Edward is a vampire after doing some research and asking him questions. The two develop a strong romantic feelings and quickly falls in love. Bella meets Edward's family vampires who happily accept her. When playing baseball together, however, they end up attracting a gang of non-vegetarian vampires. One of these vampires, James, notices that Bella is a human and decides to kill her. Edward and his family work hard to protect Bella, but James lures her to him by making her believe he has kidnapped her mother. And for the climax, tracked by James, Bella is attacked and fed on. At this moment, Edward and his family arrive and kill James. Bella nearly dies from the vampire venom in her blood, but Edward sucks it out, saving her life. And the following action, Bella wakes up in a hospital, heavily injured but alive. She still wants to be in a relationship with Edward despite the risks involved, and the two agree to stay together. And the resolution? Months later, Edward takes Bella to the prom. The two have a good time. Bella tells Edward that she wants him to turn her into a vampire right then and there. But he refuses and pretends to bite her neck instead. So that's the ending of Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. So we're done with the discussion of Freytag's pyramid as part of the discussion of literary elements. So this session we focus on plot only, but plus this is not just limited to Freytag's pyramid. I will be discussing another way on how we could present the plot of the story. So with that, thank you so much for listening and continue listening because I will be having my next discussion. So with that, goodbye and have a nice day.